The sound of the gates slamming shut echoed through the prison halls like a thunderclap. The crowd of inmates roared, their voices bouncing off the cold concrete walls. But right there, standing in the middle of the chaos, was a man no one could believe. Wearing a cap and gown with tears glistening in his eyes, he clutched a college diploma. The same man who once led prison riots and served time for armed robbery was now giving a graduation speech inside one of America's toughest prisons. His name was Elijah Cole, and that day he changed what people thought a prison could be. As Elijah raised the paper in his hand, the entire block went silent. Even the guards, men who'd once treated him like a lost cause, stood frozen, watching history unfold. Cameras clicked. Journalists leaned forward. Elijah looked around at the men in orange jumpsuits and said, "If I can earn this in here, you can too." The crowd erupted again. But what no one knew was that this moment almost never happened. Just a few years earlier, Elijah was one fight away from being locked in solitary forever. And what happened in that dark cell would change not just his life, but the entire prison system. So how did a convicted felon become the man who brought education to prison from the inside? Let's go back to the beginning, before Elijah Cole became a name that would echo in prison reform circles across America. Elijah grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. His mother worked 2 jobs, his father was gone before he could walk, and the streets were his classroom. By the time he was 15, he could take apart a car faster than most mechanics, but not because he loved engines. He was stealing them. By 18, Elijah had a reputation. Fast talker, fearless fighter, and smart enough to never get caught. Until one night he did. It was supposed to be a quick job. A convenience store on the edge of town, an easy score. But when the store clerk reached for the hidden button under the counter, panic hit. Elijah pulled out his gun. A shot rang out. No one died, but that sound changed everything. Within minutes, red and blue lights filled the street. Elijah ran, but the law ran faster. He was caught 2 blocks away, still holding the gun. At sentencing, the judge looked down and said, "Elijah Cole, for armed robbery and possession of a firearm, I sentence you to 15 years in state prison." Elijah didn't flinch. He'd been expecting it. But what he didn't expect was how prison would strip him of everything: his pride, his confidence, and his sense of who he was. The first year behind bars was pure survival. Every day felt like walking on a wire above a pit. You either joined a crew or became a target. Elijah joined. He became part of the East Block Kings, one of the toughest groups inside. They ran the phones, controlled the yard, and made sure their members never walked alone. Elijah thought that was the way to live, until one night, everything snapped. A fight broke out in the cafeteria. A rival gang member insulted one of his boys, and within seconds, trays were flying, fists were swinging, and alarms screamed. Elijah grabbed a broken piece of plastic and charged. The next thing he remembered was blood on his hands and guards dragging him across the floor. For that, Elijah was sent to solitary confinement, 23 hours a day in a tiny, windowless cell. No sound, no human contact, just his own thoughts echoing in the dark. The first week he screamed. The second, he went silent. By the third, he began talking to himself. Days blurred into nights. Time didn't exist. But then something strange happened. During a routine check, a guard noticed a torn-up book near his bed. It was an old, tattered copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X. Elijah had found it in the trash bin on his way to solitary. At first, he just read to stay sane. But then the words started to stick. Education is the passport to the future. That line hit him like a lightning bolt. For the first time, Elijah saw something different. An escape not through the gates, but through learning. He started reading anything he could get, old newspapers, pamphlets, even dictionaries. He began writing his thoughts on the walls in chalk. The guards thought he was losing it. Maybe he was, but losing his old self. After 6 months, Elijah was released from solitary. When he walked back into general population, something about him had changed. He wasn't angry anymore. He was focused. Every night, he'd sit by the dim prison light, reading and taking notes. Other inmates started to notice. Some laughed, others got curious. One day, an older inmate named Curtis came up to him and said, "Yo, man, what's that you reading like it's gold?" Elijah looked up and said, "It might be." Curtis sat down beside him. That was the start of something no one in that prison had ever seen before: a study group inside the block. At first, it was just 2 men reading old GED books. Then it became 5. Then 10. Within a year, more than 30 inmates were showing up to study. Elijah began writing lesson plans, explaining math and English like a real teacher. Word spread fast, so fast that even the warden heard about it. When the warden called Elijah to his office, he thought it was over. Maybe they'd shut it down. But instead, the warden leaned back and said, "You got something special going here. What if we made it official?" Elijah couldn't believe what he was hearing. A real education program, inside the same prison where he once fought to survive. But not everyone was happy about it. Some inmates thought he'd gone soft. Others wanted to use the program as a cover for gang meetings. The pressure started building again. Then, one night, as Elijah walked back to his cell after class, a shiv glinted in the dim light. Someone was waiting for him in the shadows. The hallway was silent except for the hum of the flickering lights. Elijah froze. He saw the glint of the blade before he saw the face. Instinct kicked in. He stepped back just as the attacker lunged, the shiv slicing through the air inches from his chest. The 2 men crashed against the wall, grunting, struggling for control. Elijah felt the sting of the blade scrape his shoulder, but adrenaline drowned the pain. "Man, you think you better than us now?" the attacker hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "Reading books, talking to the warden like you some kind of hero?" Elijah pushed back hard, his heart racing. "You don't get it," he said between breaths. "I'm doing this for us." The man's grip tightened. Elijah twisted his arm, sending the shiv clattering to the floor. Guards shouted in the distance, running toward the noise. The attacker swung one last time before they pulled him away. Elijah stood there, breathing hard, his shirt torn, blood trickling down his arm. He didn't fight back. He just stared at the man being dragged away, another broken soul who didn't believe change was possible. That night, Elijah lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, the smell of disinfectant and metal in the air. The warden visited him later, his face serious. "You okay, Cole?" "I'm fine," Elijah replied. "But this has to mean something. These guys don't need more punishment, they need purpose." The warden looked at him for a long time before nodding. "Then let's make it happen." The next morning, word spread like wildfire. The college man had survived. The attack that was meant to silence him only made him louder. The warden approved an official education program, allowing Elijah to lead it. They brought in real teachers from outside, volunteers from local colleges who believed in second chances. Within months, classrooms were formed inside the old visitation hall. Desks replaced metal tables. Textbooks replaced gambling decks. And for the first time, laughter and debate echoed through the place that once knew only anger. Elijah wasn't just a student anymore. He was a teacher, a mentor, a leader. He began studying for his own degree through a correspondence program. History, sociology, English, he devoured it all. Every night he wrote letters to education boards and nonprofits, trying to bring in resources. Some never replied, but a few did. Slowly, the program grew. Still, the transformation wasn't easy. There were fights, resistance, and plenty of setbacks. Some guards mocked him, saying, "You can't fix criminals with books." Others secretly admired him. Even some of his old crew members started joining his classes. One of them, a guy named Reggie, could barely read when he started. 6 months later, he passed his GED. When he did, the entire room cheered like someone just won their freedom. Elijah knew this was bigger than him now. It wasn't about surviving anymore, it was about rebuilding. Years passed. The man who once came into prison angry and lost had become its heartbeat. By his 10th year, Elijah had helped over 200 inmates earn GEDs. Some went on to take college-level courses. The prison began receiving media attention, and reporters started calling Elijah the professor of Cell Block D. Then one afternoon, Elijah was summoned to the warden's office again. This time, the warden was smiling. "Cole," he said, handing him an envelope, You've been accepted to a college re-entry program. When you get out, they're offering you a full scholarship. Elijah just stared at the letter. For a long time, he couldn't speak. He remembered the cell walls that once felt like they'd close in forever. He thought about the nights he whispered to himself just to hear another voice. And now, when his release day finally came, the yard was full. Inmates lined the fences, shouting his name. Some banged on the bars, others raised their hands in salute. Elijah walked through the gates carrying nothing but a small bag of books and the letter that changed his life. Outside, the air felt different. It smelled like rain and hope. Months later, sitting in a real college classroom surrounded by students half his age, Elijah opened his notebook and smiled. His hands were rough, scarred from years of work, but they now held a pen instead of a weapon. One of the students turned to him and whispered, "Hey, aren't you that guy who started a school in prison?" Elijah chuckled softly. "Yeah," he said, "but I'm still learning too." Over time, he began speaking at universities, nonprofits, and even in front of Congress about prison education reform. His story inspired new programs across the country, helping thousands of inmates gain access to education behind bars. The system that once broke him had become his platform to rebuild others. And so, from convict to college graduate, Elijah Cole became the man who changed prison from the inside. His journey was proof that no wall, no sentence, no label could stop a man who decided to rise.